Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. As we acknowledged earlier today, I believe it's Earth Day, so happy Earth Day to everyone. We will begin this meeting at 3 p.m., and as is our tradition, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1. I'm joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2 and Jody Sheddock McNally from District 3. Across the way, we have our Assistant County Attorney 3, Frank Haug, and we have various folks from our Community Development Department. At this time, I will turn it over to, I believe, Rebecca, who can introduce her colleagues and some folks over here. And then we'll talk a little bit about procedures, civility, things of that nature, where the agendas are available. And then I'll say a word or two about the agenda as well as consent agenda items. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Everett, Community Development Director. I'm joined up here by Michael Whitley, Senior Planner with Community Development, and Jenny Oxmaker, our Planning Manager. Across the way, we have Leah Schneider with the Health Department, Stephen Rothwell with Engineering, Justin Curry with Planning, and Laura Culleton with Planning. We respectfully request that all members of the audience please silence your electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and hearing procedure instructions, which are located to the right of the hearing room entrance and also posted online. Please wait to speak until you are recognized by the chair at the appropriate time during the hearing. Please maintain civility, refraining from any audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether in support or against. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. We do have a portable microphone available as needed. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that those who are in the room and those who are viewing the hearing virtually over Zoom can hear. Upon request, we do have assisted listening devices that are available for the hearing impaired. For those who are watching this hearing on Zoom, you will be muted until you are recognized by the chair. And if you wish to speak or request an item on the consent agenda be moved to the discussion agenda, please use the raise hand function on the Zoom control bar at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well done. So before I go over the agenda, I wish to point out that there are 5 consent agenda items and then 2 discussion items. A word or two about consent. These are typically ones that are more administrative in nature. There is no perceived controversy, and unless a consent agenda item is pulled off of the consent agenda item by one of the 3 commissioners or perhaps by the public, then we typically will move to approve those items en masse. So there are 5 consent agenda items, and then there are 2 discussion items. Regarding the 2 discussion items, one is a rezoning and one is a special review application. There will be a full hearing, which basically means that when we get to those items, I think the presentation will be combined, and there'll be a presentation from staff, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to present, to make their case for what they're proposing. I believe there was a request regarding an 8-minute video. I'm going to respectfully decline that request because we did get photographs as part of our packet, and so we do have a sense of what this project may look like. But there will be a full discussion, which basically means after the presentation, after the applicant presents, we can ask questions, but then we'll open it up for public comment at some point, and folks can participate in person or via Zoom. Then we'll close public comment and then give the applicant an opportunity, if there's a need, to do a rebuttal. And then ultimately we'll ask additional questions and deliberate and do the best we can to make informed decisions. So that's kind of how that works. Let me go through the list on the agenda. and then we'll address the consent agenda items and kind of go from there. Regarding today's public hearing consent items, the first one is an amendment to Article 13.6.1C4 of the Land Use Code, file number 24-code 0277. And this is a request to change the short-term rental cap in the Estes Valley, moving it from the current 266, moving that cap to 208. And there is a rationale behind that, given the Windcliff Estates and what the decisions made around rezoning of that particular neighborhood. The second consent agenda item is CLHS Enterprises LLC, a rezoning, file number 23-zone, excuse me, take a deep breath here, zone 3556, a request to rezone the property from urban residential 1 to planned development. And this is located out on East Mulberry Street in the growth management area. The third item on consent is the Askland rezoning file number 23-zone 3565. And this is a proposal to remove conditions of approval from property located in an existing commercial corridor zoning district, and which currently limits the use of that property, and that's what this one is about. The fourth consent agenda item is the Neubauer Conservation Development, file number 22-land, LAND 4225, preliminary plat approval for a conservation development on 50 acres, and this is up in the LaPorte area. And it has actually gone through our LaPorte Planning Advisory Committee process. The fifth and final consent agenda item is an amended plat of Lot 3, Ness or Kness MRD, file number, minor residential development, for those of you who wish to know what that stands for, file number 24-land 4406. This is an amended plot of Lot 3 in this particular MRD subdivision to vacate the existing building envelope, and I believe this has to do with an accessory living area. So those are the 5 consent agenda items. Colleagues, do either of you wish to remove any of these from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then we'll bring it out to you all. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to remove one of these 5 consent agenda items off of the consent agenda? And what that means is then we would have a full hearing discussion item. Is there anybody online, Jenny, who may want to do that?
Just a reminder, if you're online, please
Thank
use
you.
the raise your hand function. We have no hands raised.
Great. So then we will keep those items on the consent agenda, and I will ask Commissioner Shattuck McNally if you would offer the proper motion, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move to approve the items on the consent agenda subject to the conditions in the staff reports, and further move to authorize the chair to sign the findings and resolutions.
Thank you kindly. That's a proper motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 That passes 3-0. So we'll now move on to the 2 items. And let me state those items. I believe I neglected. Thank you, Matt. I've neglected to mention those items. So the 2 public hearing discussion items. The first is the Riverside, Colorado LLC rezoning file number 23-zone 3520. And the second one, as I indicated, oh my goodness, well, you all have a good afternoon. I thought that maybe you were all here to see me, but I guess not. Well, the second discussion item, Riverside, Colorado LLC Special Review and Appeals, file number 23-Zone 3519. So there are two separate items, two separate motions. We will present them together. We will have the opportunity to ask staff questions, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant. You're on, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Michael Whitley with the Larimer County Planning Division. And again, these two items that are before you this afternoon are the Riverside, Colorado LLC rezoning, file 23 Zone 3520. And that is a request to rezone a 1.23 acre parcel from O open to RC rural commercial. And also, separate item, Riverside, Colorado LLC Special Review and Appeals, file 23 Zone 3519. That is a special review for the expansion of a campground, and the request includes appeals to several sections of the land use code regarding maximum density allowed in a campground, minimum tent and RV space sizes, campsite setback requirements, some landscaping requirements, road frontage requirements, and also a landscape buffer requirement. And I will note that I will be fairly brief with my presentation, with the idea that should questions come up, we can explore any given item in further detail as a part of question and answers, or if you would like me to explain something in greater detail, I can certainly do that. So, as mentioned, this subject property is a 1.23 acre parcel. It's located at 9940 West Highway 14, Bellevue. That's located north of Highway 14, approximately 500 feet east of the intersection of Highway 14 and Poudre River Road. So the Columbine Lodge Special Review was approved by the Board of County Commissioners on July 27th, 2010. That special review granted approval for an existing non-conforming resort lodge, RV park, and retail store allowed for the expansion of the use and included tent camping and an office retail space for a recreational business. So it was a non-conforming use prior to that point. That 2010 special review memorialized that approval, granted it legal conforming status, and allowed for the expansion of that use. So in conjunction with the special review, there were appeals granted by the Board of County Commissioners at that time with regards to the minimum size required for a campground, access road width, campground setbacks, and also a comfort station requirement. So the Columbine Lodge Special Review limited campers to 35 people in 10 designated camping sites. And at the time of approval, the northern quarter, plus or minus, of the property was within the Cache-la-Poudre floodplain. And those 10 designated camping sites that were approved through that special review were located outside of the floodplain. So in 2012, the property owners completed a letter of map revision process that removed the property from the floodplain. So currently, as of 2012, there's no flood hazard identified on this property. So post that, in 2019, there was an amended special review approval granted by the Board of County Commissioners that allowed 7 of the 10 camping sites that were approved as a part of that 2010 special review to be relocated to the northern property line adjacent to the river. And this is the 2019 site plan that was approved as a part of that special review, and it shows the relocation of those campsites. Now, that special review did not include an expansion of the number of campsites, and it did not increase the occupancy allowed on the property. So this property is currently zoned O, which stands for open, and until 2020, campgrounds were allowed in the open zoning district with special review approval. And actually I think that should be 2022. Actually, it's 2020 or 2022. No, it's 2020, I'm sorry. So campgrounds are no longer allowed in the open zoning district, but modern campgrounds are allowed in the RC, Rural Commercial Zoning District, with special review approval. So there are actually 4 separate applications currently being reviewed by this for this property. So there's the special review and the rezoning, which are being considered today. There's also a separate amended plat application that will be approved or denied administratively. That's basically just to consolidate parcels that already exist to make this 1.23 acre parcel one lot. It's part of pieces and parts of an old, very old subdivision right now. There is also a setback variance application that is going to be considered by the Board of County Commissioners to look at setbacks from side and rear property lines, but then also from the center line of the Poudre River. So there is a setback variance that will be considered by the Board of Adjustment. That hearing has not yet been scheduled, but that is separate from this application. So should that variance be denied, the property owners would just have to reconfigure the site, kind of to relocate campsites and tents away from those setbacks. So this special review application, and I'm showing the proposed site plan, proposes to add 2 units for rent within an existing building located here. It would add 20 campsites for a total of 30. It proposes to remove several mobile homes and replace them with cabins, and would add 9 RV sites to be occupied by tiny homes on wheels. So there would be a total of 49 overnight sites. And each of those 49 sites would be limited to 2 persons in terms of an occupancy. So the applicant's project description describes the project as a glamping or a glamour camping operation. So rather than have customers bring their own tents and RVs, tents on platforms and RVs and tiny homes are available on site to rent. Instead of individual fire pits, 2 to 3 communal fire pits are proposed, and there would be 2 communal cooking areas to be shared by guests. There's also a proposal where catering could be provided on site. So I would like to note that some of the application materials say that campsites will have platforms. And since the Planning Commission hearing, we've had a little bit of discussion with the property owner. The proposal is to allow the tents, kind of without any kind of change to the number, but the applicant has requested that the platforms be optional. So it doesn't really change the use of the property, the density of the property, et cetera, but they would just like to have the option of providing or not providing platforms. So the project description indicates that approximately 70% of the guests would arrive by individual car, with the remainder arriving by way of shuttle or carpooling to be arranged by the campground. The project description also indicates that a shuttle or carpooling will be provided to guests while they stay on site to, kind of recreation areas, the Mishawaka, which is a few miles down the road, et cetera. And as I mentioned, the occupancy of each tent or RV and cabin would be limited to 2 individuals. So there is review criteria for each of these applications, and I'm projecting the review criteria for the rezoning now. The rezoning review criteria can be found on pages 256 to 259, and without going through them individually, I will just note that the Development Services team has no concerns with the review criteria. From staff's perspective, it's clear that it meets the review criteria and that the rezoning would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So with the special review, there are 5 review criteria, and again, I will not read through them, but they can be found on pages 289 through 291 of your staff report. The main technical consideration for this application has been the septic system. So I will discuss that briefly, again, with the idea that we can circle back to discuss that in greater detail. But the Department of Health and Environment staff have concerns with the existing septic system's ability to accommodate the increased occupancy of this property. So the applicant and the Department of Health and Environment have agreed to a phasing of improvements which will allow for the collection of information needed regarding the adequacy of the existing unlet septic system. So phase 1 of this application would include the caretaker's unit, 2 lodging units within that existing building, 7 cabins, 9 tiny homes and RVs, the communal gathering area, the retail store, road improvements, parking, etc. So each overnight unit, again, would be limited to 2, and that's very important for a septic capacity perspective. With phase 1, a minimum operating period of 3 months at full capacity during the summer season will be required for a wastewater analysis. And so during that phase 1, the applicant will be collecting information and data that will be provided to the Department of Health and Environment, and only when the Department of Health and Environment is convinced that the existing septic system is adequate to handle not only the increased capacity, but phase 1 as it is proposed, only then would they be allowed to increase the occupancy through phase 2. And phase 2 would consist of an additional 12 campsites, adding 24 additional guests. It is possible, as a part of that data collection, if the Department of Health and Environment determines that a decrease in capacity is required, it is possible that we would require that the Phase 1 occupancy be decreased, but that is to be evaluated by the Department of Health and Environment. So there are, as I mentioned, several appeals. And again, without getting into kind of the minutia of each one, generally, the campground standards are intended to result in the development of a campground with private spaces for each tent or RV, and to provide separation between tents and RV spaces, and to provide large buffers between campgrounds and adjacent residential development. The applicant's project description and appeal request make the point that the regulations have been added to the land use code in the last several years, and the existing campground, which has been operating for several decades, is consistent with the two previous special review approvals, but would not comply with the campground requirements as they are in the code. So again, in 2010, when the special review was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, there were several appeals that were granted, and the property has been operating in compliance with those appeals. And it should be noted that the setbacks, some of the setbacks and separations that are being proposed as a part of this application were not in existence in the prior code. And so basically what we've got is a campground that doesn't comply with the current requirements. And actually, because of its size, it could not comply with the existing code requirements, particularly with regards to separation from residential properties. So again, the applicants represent and staff agrees that the size and configuration of the existing property makes it infeasible to comply with those elements of the land use code. And so until very recently, there has been no public opposition stated, kind of expressed against this application. Just today, we did receive 2 emails that expressed concerns with the density. One email specifically had kind of concerns with the septic the septic system, and concerns that the septic system could not accommodate the increased capacity. Again, kind of that's why the phasing plan is being proposed. The second email raised questions about the occupancy of each individual unit within the campground. I have talked to one of the property owners, and they do represent it, and I'll let them expand on that. That information that is on the website, at least as of 2 hours ago, is not actual the intended occupancy. That was based on some initial numbers that had been proposed, but that website will be corrected. So given that the existing campground doesn't comply with the current standards, given that the applicant's intent is to provide smaller individual spaces and more of a communal gathering space, kind of different from a traditional campground, and given the lack of concern from neighboring property owners, which was written prior to today, before these other concerns that have been expressed, the Development Services team does find that the appeals to the standards would not subvert the purpose of the code, and the Development Services team does support the appeals as requested. So this application was reviewed by the Planning Commission on March 20th. This was a discussion item at their 6 o'clock agenda. 2 members of the public spoke in favor of the request, and ultimately the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of both the rezoning and the special review, with the motion passing 8-0. So we do have findings. The Development Services team does find that the rezoning meets the applicable review criteria. We also find that the special review meets the applicable review criteria, and that the appeals comply with the applicable review criteria. And we have 2 separate recommendations. So the Larimer County Planning Commission and the Development Services team recommend approval of the Riverside, Colorado LLC rezoning, file 23 zone 3520. And the Larimer County Planning Commission and Development Services team recommend approval of the Riverside, Colorado LLC special review and appeals, file 23 zone 3519, subject to the 14 conditions found on pages 283 to 284 of the agenda packet. Let's see. So that is a very brief summary of my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. Colleagues, this would be an opportunity if you have questions, comments, observations. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael, can you just for my
Is your mic on?
yes, sir. Thank you. Can you repeat just a little bit about this phase one, phase two, and kind of the conditions if after phase one they see that it is the septic is not adequate? Can you just explain that one more time, please?
Certainly. And I'll give you the basics, and then Leah Schneider with the Health Department, who is present, can kind of fill in some of the details. So the basic is the Department of Health and Environment is not convinced that the existing septic system can handle the full capacity as proposed. And the full capacity being the 49 units with an occupancy of 2 each. And so, as an opportunity for the applicant to start this operation, this expanded operation, we have proposed, and the Department of Health and Environment and the applicant have come to an agreement to phase the application where the initial operation will basically be everything but 12 campsites. So it would be all the RVs, all the cabins, the 2 lodging facilities that are proposed within the existing building, and then all but 10 of the 20 new campsites, so 10 campsites, additional campsites, in addition to the 10 that are already approved. During that first phase, the applicant is required to collect data with regards to flows. And again, I'll let Leah fill in some details about that data to demonstrate that the existing system can adequately handle the proposed capacity. When and if the Department of Health and Environment says, yes, we are convinced that this septic system can accommodate the full proposed use, we will allow the increased capacity. And again, it is possible that based on the data that's collected, the Department of Health and Environment could come to the conclusion that the existing septic system cannot even adequately handle phase one, and that phase one would need to be scaled back. That will be based on the data collected by the applicant and analyzed by the Department of Health and Environment.
So I'm curious how that works. I mean, this is a question for our county attorney. How do we walk back something that's approved? Is that because it's in the conditions that if this septic system can't handle it, that you walk it back? I'm just curious how that works.
I think you can address it in the conditions. I think they've drafted some language that they think is appropriate to make sure that that doesn't go beyond the scope.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. This is probably for Leah, though. So some of the, and maybe this is, you know what, I'm going to wait till after we hear from the public to ask my question to see if they ask that question. And if not, I'll ask a question.
Thanks, Commissioner. Let me offer a question or two, and I think one of them would be directed to Leah Schneider from our Health and Environment Department. Could you say a little bit more about the septic system? What type of septic system is it? And there's a reference in the packet to the capacity being 2,000 gallons per day. Could you talk a little bit about that, how we would collect that data, and if we determine, is 3 months enough time to collect data to determine, there's a couple of questions in there, sorry.
Yeah, no, sure. So the existing septic system, we have a couple of add-ons onto it. We have a few septic tanks and fields out there. It's your traditional, it's a tank and field, nothing fancy. But in the past, we used to be able to size larger systems, and that was okay for that time. But I believe it was like 2001, 2006 that we locally can no longer approve systems that are over 2,000. And with this change of use, we decided to hold it at 2,000. If they wanted to repair it, amend it, they need to demonstrate that it can stay under 2,000. Otherwise, they can't operate at the proposed level even in phase one, or they'll have to install a state level system. We basically would have to do a cease and desist, and they couldn't operate until they got the approved system in that's capable of handling what their loads are. So what we're going to analyze, we want their 3 busiest months because the yurts are seasonal. They won't be there year round. So during the summer, we'll have all the yurts set up. That's the 18 yurts. with 2 people per yurt, compared to the past 10 tent sites that had 35 total. And then the tiny homes and cabins, those will now have 2 people each, whereas before they had RVs and cabins of unknown occupancy. And they're also doing low flow fixtures. So we are going to see a little bit of water conservation. And then what we're going to look for are daily water flows. So they have a well that provides, it's a treated well. We have a meter on it, so we'll be able to get how much water is consumed on that site. We also want a guest occupancy log per day to find out how many people are there, make sure that it's actually full occupancy. And then during those periods of full occupancy, they actually have to do 3 samples of their wastewater and pull it from the septic tank to test for the load. If the strength of the waste is higher than anticipated, that could even impact the design of the septic system. Because like I said, it's just a traditional, I think gravel and pipe, or it might be infiltrators. I have to go back and look at the design. But that could also impact some of this. So we have quite a few things that we're asking for to reevaluate the system before they could even be completely approved at the phase 1 even.
So it's a type of vault system that needs to be emptied periodically, or?
No, no, it's traditional. The waste will just flow through a series of tanks and then out to a field, so that gives time to settle
so
out
it's
more solids.
Leach field kind of? Is it a leach field kind
Yes,
of?
an absorption field. So it's tanks and absorption field, but we do have a vaulted restroom out there, and that needs to be pumped. So that's just a vault. It used to support the tents that were out there, but that's still going to be on site, closer to some of the yurt setups. So that will still be accessible for use and also help compensate some of the wastewater flows.
That's helpful. I think
Yeah.
I'd like to ask one more question regarding the setback. I mean, the 10 sites on the north end that are closest to the river. I mean, could someone speak to any risks posed by additional capacity and how that might impact the Poudre River? Since I think we're looking at either through the Board of Adjustment or tonight looking at appealing what that 100-foot setback from the river. Could you speak to that, Michael, please?
Yes, sir. So the 100-foot setback from the river is a different, so it's found in a section of the code that specifies that the Board of Adjustment is the decision maker on that particular type of application. And so it will be the Board of Adjustment that says yes or no to that setback reduction to the center line of the Poudre River. Also, we have a requirement that each campsite be at least 5 feet from rear and side property lines. There are several of these that are closer than that. That is also subject to the variance application, which will be decided by the Board of Adjustment at a separate public hearing.
Thank you. And just final follow-up question to what you just said, sir, and that is, so when the Board of Adjustment is considering these variances regarding the one that has to do with adjusting the setback from the Poudre River, they'll have information data that shows complying with that or proving that would not pose any harm to the river?
So one of the considerations is drainage, and that is being evaluated by engineering department staff. And so that is we still do not have a firm recommendation from engineering from a drainage perspective. And so that's kind of the technical perspective. The Board of Adjustment could ask questions about water quality that are above and beyond our requirements, but I know that Stephen Rothwell is evaluating that. I would also like to make one slight correction. I think I gave you the right information during the presentation, but when Commissioner Shattuck McNally asked for an overview of that phasing, I incorrectly said that phase 1 would include 20 campsites. Phase 1 actually includes 18, and phase 2 would be the additional 12. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's correct in the staff report. I believe I said it right the first time, but then when I was paraphrasing, I gave you slightly wrong numbers. So it's 18 as opposed to 20 as a part of phase 2,
right.
Phase 1
Thank you, Michael.
numbers.
Thank you for clarifying.
Certainly, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Seeing none, then I think we can move into applicant. I believe you know the routine, sir. And if you would be kind enough to introduce yourself, in what capacity you are here this evening, And I think, Rebecca, are you speaking on behalf of the applicants, Tom?
I'll be one speaker. But as I have a reputation for being somewhat verbose, I'll be quick. I promise. I'll be
And
very
actually,
brief.
that reminds me, what do we typically, what's the time limit? 10 minutes or 15, or it's what folks need?
Yeah,
Pardon?
we generally aim for about 10 minutes.
Will that be sufficient,
I'll
Tom?
be very quick. And primarily, I'm here. My name is Tom Donnelly. I'm here on behalf of Royal Holdings LLC. And my number one thing I'm going to do is introduce the actual owners of the campground, of Mike Jensen and Danny Grant. They're going to do the lion's share of the proposal. I know the board has what will likely be a long hearing this evening, and we've all recognized that, and so we'll try to be as quick as we can. I'll save most of my remarks for questions in the event that we do need to address some operational issues that you may have or questions you may have regarding the application. One thing I did want to mention, though, if I can, if you'd humor me just for a second. A few years ago, we did a community survey, which really looked at what people's views were of Larimer County, the things that they thought were working well, the things that needed help. And one thing that was overwhelmingly a response was that what folks felt like the history of Larimer County needed to be maintained. It needed to be kept and passed on to those who come after us. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean we need to keep and preserve agriculture here. It can mean we need to maintain our community feels and our separate communities. And it also can mean that we need to maintain that, for lack of a better word, that zeitgeist of the flavor of different areas of our county. I think in Poudre Park, what really encapsulates that community, perhaps better than anything else, are really two things. One is Mishawaka, and the second is the Columbine Lodge campground. That campground has been in existence since, I believe, the 1930s. We can ask Mike, but it says a long history there. It's a landmark, a wayfinding spot for folks, and so I think that to preserve something, sometimes it's necessary for that thing to evolve as well. And so I think this is a natural evolution, which represents really the way that folks would like to use a campground, maybe more modern way that citizens and travelers might like to try to use a campground. And no pun intended, this is really, actually, a pun is intended. This is actually meant to operate in concert with Mishawaka. And as you know, Danny is the owner of Mishawaka. She plans to utilize this as a means for someone who wants to go to a concert. They can have a nice place to sleep, and or they can go up and leisurely get a ride to the concert and then come back and not have to worry about what they're going to do for their night's accommodations. I think that one thing I really wanted to mention to you is that Danny is somewhat of a known entity here. As much of a known entity here in Larimer County, and I think certainly to this Board of Commissioners as well. And I don't know when it was, 12 years ago, or when she bought Mishawaka, I think we all would have been amazed if we could come forward in time and see how well run and how well managed that facility has become. I remember in the old days, and people were sleeping on the side of the road, and all kinds of crazy stuff was going on up there. And so it benefited significantly from professional operations and management, and I feel like that the same can happen here on this campground property as well. So as I mentioned, I will. One other thing, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I wanted to mention to respond to your question real quickly. 2,000 gallons is a bright line of distinction for anyone here, because that if you go beyond that, you're mandated to go through the state health department for your permitting. We love our local folks and we love working with them. And so there's no way that they will ever go beyond that 2,000 gallon a day limitation. So if in the event that the campsite is approved is generating beyond that, they're gonna do it on themselves without without any kind of requirement from the county, because they do not want to be regulated by the state. They want to be regulated here by our local health department. So without further ado, I will introduce Danny and Mike, and I will be back during the question and answer phase. One other thing I might mention is Troy Jones is our architect, and he's here with us too
Great.
for any technical questions.
And I'm mindful that we now have 5 minutes and 29 seconds, and I appreciate your efforts at being succinct. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the owners, and if you folks could identify yourself, spell your names if there's a need, and really get into the specifics of what you're proposing.
My name is Michael Jensen, Jensen. I'm one of the owners, partners with Danny.
And I'm Danny Grant, owner of Mishawaka. That's a very hot mic. I'm going to back up a little. And this is a really important project for us, so we'll rush it, but it's been a long year and a half, 2 years of work, and so we're really excited to present this to you and share the work that we're doing and how we're planning to protect this place. One thing I'll say is that the 14 years I've been managing Mishawaka, Columbine Lodge has come up to me many, many times from neighbors asking if we can work on making that just as sustainable and as conscientious about the environment as Mishawaka is. And for 10 years, Mike and I have been talking about it, and now we have an opportunity to do that. We also want to make it a really wonderful place for people to come. We want it to be a crown jewel of the county, and we think that that we can do that, and we can do it sustainably with water conservation. And the Mishawaka has been doing it for 14 years, and we don't step over our water or our sewer. We have the same exact kind of limitations up there, and we're pretty good at making sure that we're conserving. Oh, thank you. Which one do I hit?
And welcome.
Top. That's our logo. Here we go. The two other spaces here are the Poudre Park Market and the Kind Bean Coffee Cart. So those are two amenities that will be available to people in the canyon. It is 15 to 20 miles to the next closest place to buy a loaf of bread. So I think this is going to be of great benefit to the community. Never mind espresso, right? This is the Coloradoan captured a great moment of Robin Jones long ago arguing with neighbors. I think it just depicts some of the problems that have been up there for many, many years, and the safety concerns and the issues, and what's really been a thorn in the neighbor's side. The turning point for Mishawaka was really the High Park fire. It was a special year for the magical Mishawaka, according to the Boulder Daily Camera. We did a lot of work with neighbors, have commemorated that fire, and then from there, I think everybody really kind of began to understand the importance of this space for the community. There's a documentary I think you all should watch, Long Live the Mish. It's about the High Park fire and the Mishawaka's role in that fire mitigation. I have a long list here, I won't go through it, of things that we've solved at Mishawaka and the problems that we intend to solve at Riverside. Many of them come from no oversight and no security. We're putting 30 cameras across this entire campsite that'll be monitored by someone living on site and managing. Our lovely GM is here, Jimmy Little, and her 80-year-old mother will be up there with her. And I have no doubt in my mind that we will be doing a much better job of preserving that river and making sure that things don't get out of hand. Alone, the number of fire pits that were across that place was extremely dangerous. Jump in if you want to add anything. Sure. We've had incredible sustainable environmental impact with our transportation system. I have 14 buses in my fleet, and we carry 60% of the concert goers up and down from the canyon. And this same transportation company is going to provide shuttles for Riverside, Colorado to continue that conservation. And we'll also be bringing people out to different spaces in the community, like hiking spots. Oh yeah, see this?
And Danny, I don't mean to be rude. I'm just trying to be fair with how this works. And if you, as much as you can focus on what you're proposing, because we're now down to 1.5 minutes, and of course I'll give you more time, but I'm just trying to be fair.
Yeah. Well,
forgive me.
It's okay. I think one thing, you can turn this off, Michael. Let's just get to the business of it. Our neighbors are very excited. Our contiguous neighbors are in support. We had an amazing neighborhood meeting that we invited, not with anyone asking us to, that we had 80 participants at. We've done surveys with people who've had many, many positives, and I think you'll hear from some of those people today. And we have no intention of shooting ourselves in the foot, according to the health department, and we'll make sure that.
And I've been involved with the property for 17 years. I've certainly observed all of the issues and all of the things that kind of go with the territory. I've certainly admired and watched what Danny's done with the Mishawaka and how she's reinvented that. There was no better choice for a partner than Danny, the way she operates, the way these two operate in tandem. Tom hit on it a little bit, maybe with too much emphasis on the concert side. We do not believe that that necessarily is the case. We believe that this is a special property for recreating, for hiking, for mountain biking. We hope that there's some parlay into the winter months over time for other snowshoeing and snow type of activities. But this is not just for concert going. This is for a crown jewel of northern Colorado and Larimer County to help enjoy the beautiful scenic Poudre Canyon that we all love and appreciate. So, thank you for the opportunity.
We'll leave it at that.
Yes, thank you. Hang on a second, folks. So I wonder, I think it would be appropriate if my colleagues have any questions of you all as the applicants, or perhaps Tom, to try to get at more details regarding the proposal. Commissioner Stevens, you want to begin, please?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Can you just talk a little bit more about glamping? Like, so the model is a little bit different than sort of traditional style camping. So why did you kind of move to this model? What do you think, just kind of a little bit why this model looks a little different, and it looks a little bit different in the way that we would like there's obviously some variances requested. So just kind of, if you could speak to that.
It's much more low impact, this type of camping. So the idea is that someone comes and they're bringing a small duff kit in their backpack with their recreating gear instead of their tent and their cooler and all these things. And then they forgot this and they forgot that, and they're zipping here and zipping there and burning miles up and down the canyon. The idea is this is a turnkey facility where literally down to the linens. And obviously, as kind of the experience economy has changed and how people interact with outdoors and interact with facilities like this, we're looking to get to a point where literally we can pick them up at the door at DIA, bring them up on the shuttle bus, create an East Coast or a West Coast experience in Colorado on the Poudre River. So that's why the facility is designed this way. And the tiny houses.
We control the shampoos, the soaps, all the things that are going to be in play at the campground. And that's something that we're hoping is part of our reduction in impact to the nature around there.
So do you feel like that'll result in less like waste and that?
Less waste, less toxic waste. We'll be very mindful of those things. And I think, bringing people together, it's almost kind of like the,
Can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Almost like the conservation easements that happen in large developments, and pulling people together and lowering the impact across that space, making sure that we've got paths for wildlife through the campgrounds. And so those are the things that we're thinking about. And bringing people in together in clumps and clusters helps us do that.
Thank you for explaining that. I'm good.
Thank you. And yeah, the closer you can get to the mic, the better for all of us, especially me. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, then I may have a question or two.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation and bringing this forward. My first question is, it sounded like what was on the website versus what you're stating here is there'd be 2 person per occupancy. So for me, I'm thinking in my head, this sounds like this is not for families with multiple children. This would be more of an adult kind of experience. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it is more oriented towards adults.
It's a wild and raging river there on the.
That's been a concern for us. This property in its previous use, we went through some steps before we even submitted this application. We've been working on this for 18 months. There is an existing approval. We considered what that approval looks like. There were obviously mobile homes on this site previously. I'm sure you're familiar. There were 4 or 5 or 6 occupants sometimes in those homes. So we know that we're controlling now those numbers much better, but that was the We're working with a unique website called Cloudbeds, and our web developer had previous plans up on the website from what that would have looked like with its current existing approval compared to what we're proposing with our new special review request.
Great.
But we can confirm two people per
Yeah,
site.
and obviously the tail wagging the dog here is the septics
Yeah,
and also the parking. We have 53 parking spaces, so it would be impossible to bring in any more people without accommodating parking, even with shuttle and those types of services.
Great. And then would the proposed store with the bread and the coffee thing, would that be available to other residents in the area, in the park?
Year round. Yeah. In fact, all of the local residents will have a discount to that store as well to try and make it a little bit more feasible for them.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, applicants. So I think Commissioner Shattuck McNally may have touched on this, but, and I believe this may be offered as an additional condition of approval, and that is that in the information, it says 2 persons per campsite, but the website is advertising something different. What are your intentions about addressing that? And would you be, if we put that as a condition of approval, that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, would you be okay with that?
Once we just learned about this today, so once we learned it's already been changed, the website has already been changed as well.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Gonzalez, there is a proposed condition, condition 3, that does address that.
It's already in there?
Yes, sir.
Oh. All right, then we might be ahead of the game. Let's see. And I presume that there's a lot of whitewater rafting that occurs on the Cache Laputa, and you would be able, if there are people who wanted to stay up in the canyon overnight, you'd be able to accommodate their needs.
Yeah, one of our slides was about our partners in the canyon and the workforce development we're creating and the economic development we believe we're creating in the canyon that follows suit with the Mishawaka. But along with that, delivering people to those locations and partnering with Fireflies and Rocky Mountain Adventures and all of those local canyon places, they're all very excited as well.
And the mobile homes have been removed or in the process, or what?
Yes, sir, they have been removed.
We relocated everyone in partnership with Neighbor to Neighbor and had a really good experience with that. I think everyone's in a better place.
All right, thank you. I don't believe I have any additional questions at this time. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments for the applicants? Then why don't you all
Thank you
make
very
yourselves
much.
comfortable? And at this time, we'll open it up for public comment. Perhaps by a show of hands, how many folks wish to offer public comment? I see 1. Are there other folks? 2. Please don't be shy, and we'll check online if there's anyone. So 2 or 3, that could change. So let's say if you need it, you can have up to 3 minutes. If you don't need it, that's okay. So, sir, would you come on up first, and then we'll go to Sean, and then see if there's other folks. Good afternoon, welcome. If you would please introduce yourself and spell your name.
Thank you. My name is Chris Hardy, Hardy. And I stand here today in front of you to ask for approval of this request. I'm a resident of the Lower Poudre Canyon. I live a couple miles downstream from Poudre Park. And mostly what I'd like to attest to is Danny's history. She is not a business person. She doesn't establish commerce for commerce sake. She establishes opportunities for people to gather, create community, support community, and celebrate community. And unlike stocks and bonds, which you can't use their historical performance as a predictor of future performance, Danny is just the opposite of that. Her previous performance is a guarantee that what they are planning to do with Riverside will be a benefit to all the members, not just the glampers, but the members of the Poudre Canyon, the members of Poudre Park. And I think the opportunity to take the historic aspect of Poudre Park and Columbine Lodge to be reinvigorated and elevated and otherwise, sadly, no offense, Mike, what had become a blighted section of the Lower Pooter. And so I'm in huge support of this and hope you all are too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Sean, I reckon you know the routine. Maybe you could spell your last name for those of us who may not know.
Hi there, Sean Dougherty, Dougherty. I'm a resident of the Poudre Canyon as well. I just wanted to get up here and speak quickly about my email that I sent today with my concerns about the wastewater system on the site. I am very happy to hear about the guardrails that we have in place on that, because my biggest concern was just the health of the Poudre River up there, being a resident. So with that being said, I wanted to say that a lot of my concerns are alleviated just hearing that one piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So at this time, are there any other folks who are here in person who may wish to offer public comment regarding this proposal? And there are two proposals before us. One is the rezoning, and one is the special review consideration. Hello.
Hi, my name's Jan Gueswell, Gueswel. I'm a resident of Poudre Canyon. I've been in Poudre Canyon for the last 40 years, and I'm a local, so I know a lot of history, and that's my thing. And so the Columbine has a lot of great history, and it's going to be exciting to see that preserved. I spoke at the last one, drawing your attention to the fact that Lower Poudre Canyon is very limited in what we have available for us in the way of any kind of amenities, and I just repeat how we trust Danny in this endeavor, and so from an old timer, please approve it.
Thank you kindly. 40 years. Is there anyone else who wishes to offer public comment who is here in person? Then, Jenny, is there anyone online perhaps?
We do have Stephen Gardia, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, with a hand raised. I will allow you to talk, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Jenny. Stephen, welcome, and if you would be kind enough to, actually spell both of your first name and your last name, because Stephen can be spelled differently.
It's Stephen, Stephen, last name Gardia, Gardea. Jenny, thank you. You got the name right, spot on. Haven't had that happen too often. I'm wary of the time, so I'm going to just speak quickly. A simple search. I am actually in Poudre Park. I'm a next door neighbor, a couple lots away. The biggest concern is the preservation of history, which the history is the river itself. And my concern is the amount of wastewater that can be created for even 30 spots if everybody's going to have laundry done. A simple internet search shows anywhere from 500 to 10,000 gallons of water consumed. So I'm very, very curious to make sure that the measures in place do monitor this. The other concerns become runoff. We get some thunderstorms up there that can create a lot of water with the amount of cars, with the amount of awnings or campsites, that it could potentially create a flash flood situation that's going to run a lot of waste into that water. So again, I love the idea from what it was, less than a homeless community or appearance of, to a nice new rejuvenized facility is awesome. I think it's great. As far as the history, even some of the residents have told me that the Columbine isn't what it used to be, as it did burn down many years ago. But now I look, and the whole facade and the front have been torn down. So there's not much left of the old Columbine itself. And then already the fear of all these mini homes that are stacked one on top of the other. I just can't see how it's not even a fire hazard right now. If we had a fire, it would just be a flash of flame. So very, very concerned on how fast things are moving and how fast we're moving with this. I just want to make sure that we're not putting anybody in danger. I don't know how they're not in a floodplain. I know I live on the river and we're in a floodplain zoned per the county. So again, a lot of questions and a lot of concerns that we don't move too fast or approve too fast with a lot of these questions answered. Again, nothing against entrepreneurship and the idea of providing this opportunity for people, but I just want to make sure we're cautious. I don't want any problems. Thank you so much for your time.
Stephen, thank you for your thoughtful comments. Much appreciated. Jenny, is there anyone else who has signed up via the Zoom?
We do not have any other hands raised at this point.
Just do a quick check one more time, please.
If anyone online wishes to speak, please use the raise your hand function. We have no hands.
Anyone here in person? Then we will close public comment and ask the applicants, however they deem the most effective way, to come on up and offer some responses to some of the public comments that we heard. I'm curious to get your thoughts, especially on what Stephen had to say about various
Of course,
concerns.
yeah. And thank you guys for your comments. I think, we've got a lot of experience of how water can get used quickly. So we have managed some of those things with outside contracts. We will not be doing laundry on site. That's something that's not feasible. There's a lot of things that will not be happening on site that will be happening through contracts. We currently have a contract with a company called Alsco that manages all that for us in downtown Fort Collins. So there are a lot of things that are of concern, and I think bottom line, we need to make sure we're at our numbers, and we'll be doing a lot of things, a lot of costly things too, to make sure of that.
Can I add something else?
Yes,
And,
of course,
thank you, Mr.
Tom.
Chairman.
Yeah.
And thank you, Stephen. I thought that was a really thoughtful comment that you made there, or series of comments that you made. And I do think that there's validity to it, right? And so the fact of the matter is, it's the how you get here. It's not just here to there. It's how we get there. And so I think everything's been done quite deliberatively. It's been done in a way that's been thoughtful, and so for instance, I don't think the tiny homes are actually they're not even where they're supposed to be yet. They're not set up on their locations yet. So they will be moved. Any negative impacts or potential fire hazards there will be mitigated.
Landscape will come.
Yeah, landscape. Yeah, and it hasn't gone, and it actually hasn't gone quickly. This has been an 18-month process, and it still goes on, right, Stephen? We're still working through site planning work with your county engineering staff, your professional staff, to deal with things like drainage, to deal with site standards, to make sure that there's room with traffic and all those things. In fact, one of the very first things that I did when I became involved with this project was meet with the fire department on site to make sure that we had adequate turn areas, that we had place we could park a truck where they could pump from the river or whatever they had to do, and they could fight a fire safely on site. That was the very first thing I ever did when I was involved in this project, was meet with the fire department on site. And so it's been a deliberate process, working through and trying to mitigate any negative impacts, and hopefully that the end result will be really, really positive compared to perhaps how it's been in the past.
And much safer. This site will be much safer.
Two quick things I would just add. So we removed 9 40-foot long by 12, 13-foot wide trailers, 40, 50, or 60 feet long. And you have to remember these are being replaced by 16-foot to 28-foot long tiny homes. So the reduction of the actual impermeable areas it's certainly significantly less than what was existing on the site. The first thing that I did as kind of leading the construction side of this project was we spent $35,000 worth of tree work and fire mitigation. We cleaned up the site. We removed a lot of the dead trees. We limbed everything. We were very thoughtful about where those trees remained. Obviously, that feedback came from the Falbos and from reaching out. So we have been thinking about all of these things ad nauseum and in depth and detail. We started with a soft cost budget of $150,000, and we're into the 2x range with expenditures of civil and consultants, and we've hired a team that addresses all of these things. We feel it's well addressed in our submittals.
Thank you. I wonder, could you speak to one of the comments was regarding the Poudre River and the health, and any thoughts on that?
I think
Well,
they-
Well, I mean, there's, there's natural runoff that comes from rainwater and, but our facility is taking into consideration with Stephen's great suggestions, filter systems for percolation and looking at all of the, surface issues. You could probably speak to this better than I could. Yeah, and Troy can too. But yeah, there'll be much less going into that river now than before, and I hope that that the neighbors are, excited about that.
so why don't we go to the consultant real quick, and then we can see if we have questions for staff, and then we'll keep moving.
Yeah, the existing condition.
Who are you?
My name's Troy Jones, Jones. I'm the land planner and architect consultant on the project. The existing approval has 7 tent sites right up against the river, all of which have a fire pit, all of which kind of slope straight down to the river.
That's existing.
That's existing. And with the proposal, with Stephen's help, we've kind of worked out having kind of a swale right along the front of all of those that is going to take water over to a sand pit and filter and percolate down before the water ever makes its way to the river. And throughout the whole site, we'll have 4 of these sand pits distributed at various locations, coordinating with Stephen on where those locations are appropriate. We've got them designed from our civil engineer, and we just got final comments from Stephen on the details of those. So
And the
Right.
potable products too, right? There's going to be a lot of emphasis based on what's on.
Again, just a reminder, you're responding to what we heard in public comment, not necessarily to what we brought up. So,
And one other thing, you're going to get rid of all those individual fire pits, which that's an air quality issue, obviously, in itself. So
great. Thank you all very much. I think we can move on. Colleagues, at this time, before we get into deliberation, do you have any further questions for for Michael, our planner, or perhaps for Stephen, our engineer? Yes, yeah, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And now y'all got sat down comfortable. I'm going to call you back up. So I think Stephen had made that question, and I thought maybe you would be able to answer it. And Michael, that I think he had said, how I'm in the floodplain, how are they not in the floodplain, and why are they not?
Time out. We're going to stick with staff, I think.
Okay.
I'd like to go with, Stephen can answer that question.
Yeah,
Stephen, thank you.
Stephen Rothwell, Larimer County Engineering. Apologies, I wasn't sure if you're quite done with that. So,
Well, anyone can answer it. So.
okay, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So there are various processes that applicants or landowners adjacent to waterways can go through to either remove themselves from the floodplain due to existing topography or potentially elevate their property outside of it. In this instance, the property went through a letter of map amendment through FEMA back in 2018 and 2019. And through that process, the entire property's boundary is outside of the Poudre River's floodplain. And that includes both the floodway and the flood fringe.
And is that because they applied, or did they do some mitigation work to raise themselves up or out? Do we know much about that?
Yeah, they went and modeled that segment of the river and proved at that time. I'm not intimately familiar with the modeling that took place back in 2018, but I have taken a look at the actual letter of map amendment itself, showing that the modeling they conducted proves that their property is not within Poudre River's current floodplain.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just want to make sure that was one question I think the neighbor had that I want to make sure got addressed. So thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner, for staff? Commissioner Stevens, yeah.
Just a couple things probably for Leah. So one of the concerns, and I think that I heard from Sean, one of the members of the public that spoke, that the conditions, relieve some of the concerns that he had. But what would happen if a septic system failed? I mean, so a couple of people said we were downriver, and that was the concern. Is there leaching out into the river? Are there health quality concerns from people who live downriver if there were some sort of? And I know we're trying to mitigate for that to happen, but I mean, what What are
No,
the
of
concerns?
course, that is a concern. The whole canyon, everyone's on a septic system. So I don't know if the little residential units and some of those, they may also, unfortunately, those of them that are on that side of the highway along the river, if anything were to fail, it would have to be pretty excessive. Overflowing tank, a bogged down field, we'd probably see surface runnage first. So but yes, unfortunately, that could be a consequence if not caught in a timely manner, is that we could have some wastewater flowing into the river. But the idea would be that we would have to cease and desist at that moment. Once we find out, we pump everything and they can't operate until we get the system. It's an indication of failure. So they would have to be closed. And we have state regulations that we locally enforce through our septic regulations. So we could do this independent of the land use planning anyway. So just know if the condition's not there, I still have to enforce state regulation on water quality, things like that. So.
Are there signs before something like that might happen? I mean,
yeah.
like that, they would know.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, the
They'll start
owners
to
would know.
see a little bit of backage that could happen inside the house.
I mean, I don't want to be
You'll start to
graphic, but I mean, I just want to.
You'll start to see an oversaturated grass field, and people will be like, "Why is it so wet here?" There's definitely signs before we would get to river.
I appreciate that. And then I think you might have had some concerns. Well, it sounds like the food service was a concern, and was that fixed?
Yeah, well,
okay.
And that was part of it. The initial plan, they wanted to have like events on Fridays and cookouts and things, but unfortunately, we look at that as more water consumption that would impact the septic system. So they are limited. The fresh market that will be there, it's all prepackaged foods. They can't make anything there at their market. It has to come from Mish or other pre-approved sources around town, packaged ready for retail sale. And then the coffee cart that operates, they can do their baking out of Mishawaka and then bring it down, and then they'll hook up to water and sewer at the Mish, really just for general cleaning of some of their espresso equipment and things like that. But they can't prep on site because that is a lot of water consumption, hand washing, utensil washing, things like that. So we really wanted to limit that. Anything has to come from Mish or an outside source.
Okay, so but people could use the fire pits for cooking. Is that right?
Yeah,
a little bit like you put a hot dog on a stick or whatever kind
we
of situation.
Could see,
okay.
Yes, you're right. We have those communal pits, so people could, if they brought a cooler or maybe they buy something from the fresh foods market and they want to cook it on site, that's minimal to us. That's not going to impact our water flow concerns.
And then my last question was about the buffering. So it seems like we went back and forth. It seemed like the neighbors that were directly close to weren't concerned with buffering and didn't want any buffering, but it sounded like there was some recommendation around buffering. So I'm looking at either one of you to answer that. It seems like it did come up in that in your information too.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, Michael might be.
Yeah, I'll have Michael kind of touch that because that was one of my concerns too, like landscape buffering, screening. But there were some neighbor comments that were brought or things were addressed through other means.
Yes, as I mentioned before, there are a number of requirements with regards to setbacks and buffering, and those have been appealed through this application. So the property immediately to the west is actually owned by the same ownership group, and then the property owner to the east. So I believe they actually provided a letter of support that was included with the Planning Commission packet. So I've received no comments from any neighbors with regards to concerns about buffering.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I guess I missed that letter, but it probably was there. Thank you. Those are just some of the outstanding questions. I didn't know if we needed to make any additional, as we're looking at this, if we want any additional recommendations or things that they have to meet. But it sounds like we're okay with the buffering as long as the neighbors are okay with that. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else, colleagues? Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Oh, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, maybe from the applicant or maybe.
Well, actually, I'd really like us to stay focused on staff because the applicant came up for rebuttal and they did that. And now I would like to direct, unless staff feels like they can't answer the question, I'd like it to be directed to staff, please.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Michael, I was wondering about night sky stuff with the applicant when I see about the solar lighting and electric heaters. with our current standards? Is there, because it's in the canyon and kind of, more condensed, would what kind of, would the current night sky kind of for that area be applied, and how do we know if the applicant was maybe looking to go above and beyond to kind of preserve night sky kind of activities, since it is kind of an area that would provide some nice night sky and stargazing?
Yeah, so there is minimal lighting proposed as a part of this. There's lighting associated with some of the paths through the property, but there's not large freestanding light poles or what have you. And there is a requirement that any light fixtures be downcast and shielded so that they're not visible from off-site. So staff does not have any concerns with regards to night sky impacts. Now, I will note that currently we do have standards with regards to photometric levels, so you can only exceed, you can only, kind of produce so much illumination, and it has to be at a certain level at the property line. But we do not have anything that specifically says night sky. What we require is maximum illumination levels and downcast and shielded light sources. So we do not have any concerns outstanding.
And that includes kind of not casting it across property lines. It has to stay within.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And to address Commissioner Stevens's comment, so the letter of support from the property owner to the east can be found on pages 337. Found on page 337.
I think I do remember reading it. Yeah,
yes.
Now that you say that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Michael and Stephen. Colleagues, any other questions for staff? If not, then I think we can move into deliberation. Commissioner Stevens, you can go first if you'd like.
Yep, I will. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this application. I appreciate the work that both the applicants have done and that staff has done to try to get this right. I think the phasing idea is the right way to go, considering we have a lot of uncertainty around the septic. It sounds like that's perfectly acceptable to you. Obviously, you don't want the septic to fail, which sounds icky, and thanks for some of that, the additional detail on what that might look like. You would know, it sounds like, so that's good to know. But yeah, I'll be supporting this. I think, I think it is a good, this has been the historic use of this property for a long time. It's just upgrading it to a more modern and better looking and probably a better facility for people to enjoy. And I think that this, I appreciated the photos of what that kind of glamping looked like. It sounds like my kind of camping, like I would like the bed. I appreciate a bed. So I imagine that a lot of people like this, right? To not have to think about packing a million different things, to be able to enjoy the outdoors and really just go and enjoy it. So I think I like the idea. I mean, thank you for pulling out the trailers and some of the stuff. And so I think this is definitely more modern and more common way that people are looking to camp these days. So I think it fits in with the historic use. I think it's provides amenities to the neighbors as well. So I like that that feature as well. So I will be in support, and I just thank everybody for your work. It's tricky when we're kind of trying to figure out something new, but I think that this will be an asset to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, thoughts?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to thank staff and especially the Health Department for the work on this. I know it had some tricky spots, especially being along the Poudre River and also the fire hazards and things. And I know the septic system is, since I live in unincorporated Larimer County, I'm certainly very much aware of that for over 20 years. So I know how that's an important thing to think about. So, because we don't want it failing with the river. Thank you to the applicants for what I think is really a collaborative, community-minded partnership to work with the neighbors and make sure everyone's comfortable and developing that relationship and that trust. And I think that builds almost this community hub or resiliency kind of hub to make sure everyone understands what's going on, and maybe it might even be a more of a community benefit in case someone's visiting their friends. They can come over and stay there. And I like the idea of having the discount and benefit for the community for getting a loaf of bread, because sometimes that's really important, especially in the winter and things. So I want to first thank the applicants for their thoughtful approach and really bringing the community in and really alleviating their concerns even today. And thank you all for coming here today from the community to testify or bring your concerns and have those questions, because I think any project or any land use application or any policy is better when we bring everyone together and bring kind of those ideas and kind of work through it and alleviate any concerns, because everyone has a unique perspective and might have something to offer to make the proposal even stronger than it was before. So I really appreciate that kind of approach, and so really very heartfelt and exciting to see. Kind of, it's almost like a community project. So I really appreciate that. I'm kind of aware of this. I've driven past this a few times. It really is a historical use, and I think it is certainly great to take this historic property and kind of probably, I'm sure as you do this, you're going to be restoring some of the history as you do it. And then also, I think as someone who hikes a lot and camps a lot, and maybe my backpacking days are limited or shorter now, but this is something I can see would be a really benefit for those, and it's kind of nice to have it quote unquote in concert, Mr. Donnelly, with this other project. So I think there's a lot of pros with this a proposal. I do appreciate that. I'm really glad to hear about the phased approach with the septic system and being very thoughtful and careful about how that system will work. And I appreciate, I know that's not easy to have that much monitoring and to be keeping an eye on that, and also to make sure you're limiting to 2 people per the tiny home and the camping, and that's going to take a lot of monitoring and diligence, and I appreciate the applicants willing to do that and working so collaboratively in partnership with the health department to make sure, because I know with no doubt that Danny and her team are very much love the river and the Pooter as much as the rest of us, and want to make sure that they are being diligent and thoughtful. So I really appreciate that. So with that, I think that the concerns that I had about the septic system and this phasing in, and I'll be interested to see how this goes, have all been addressed. And I do think there's a lot of criteria with the community benefit and historical use, and some of the other criteria have been met and addressed. And so with that, I'll be supportive of the project and this application.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I too will support the 2 requests. A reminder that we're looking at rezoning, and I believe that the criteria that apply to rezoning, as well as the general review criteria, have been met based on the discussion, based on the recommendations from staff, and then of course the special review criteria have also, and the appeals criteria, I should mention, have also been met. So for that reason, I am supportive. I appreciate very much the applicants, and there is a track record there. So I think we can lean on that a bit as far as doing things well. Very grateful for all of that. I appreciate the folks who came and offered public comment in person and online. And there are still 2 other applications that need to be submitted. The variance process, as well as the amended plat process. So this thing still has steps to go through, and there are various conditions of approval that have been put on these proposals that also have to be met. And appreciate the person who has been up the canyon for 40 years. I'm sure there's a lot of tremendous history there, and if time allowed, it would be nice to hear some of the stories. Finally, my mother, who passed on, for many years she could never understand why I'd go camping and would want to sleep on the ground. So I think she would be delighted to know that such a facility is in the works. So with that, Commissioners, who did it last time? I think you're on, right?
I think so.
There are 2 motions, I believe. Michael, can you put those back on the screen? They're also in our packet here. I've got them pulled up.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have a slide with the suggested motions, but I can tell you what pages in the
Yeah,
staff report.
the first one
they can
is
be found.
page 253, I believe, for the
Cor-
rezoning.
Correct.
And
then for
the other one is, help me out there, Michael.
page 284.
Did you say 284?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Commissioner, you're on.
Sure, do we want two separate motions? Two separate motions, okay. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Riverside, Colorado LLC rezoning, file number 23, zoned 3520.
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll do one at a time and vote. That's a proper motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Number 2, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Riverside, Colorado LLC Special Review and Appeals, file number 23, zone 3519, subject to the conditions found in the recommendation listed in our packet.
Great, that is also a proper motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Congratulations, thanks to the community. I believe we have concluded our afternoon business. It is 4:25 PM, and we are adjourned.